Overtime!
Hey guys, this is my Atari Asteroids Cabaret arcade machine. Look at this guy. It's little, it's teeny tiny, it's so cute, and it's not working properly. So in this video, we're gonna try to fix it. Hopefully it's relatively easy because this was working up until recently. Anyway, I got this thing about 2 years ago for a great price, $100, and it was working. It just needed a little bit of TLC. You know, the coin door needed some work, some of the wiring, the buttons, whatever, but it was working and it was awesome. And it's been going great for the last 2 years, but recently it stopped working properly, and we're gonna dive into that. Now again, this is a little bit different than what you might normally see with an Asteroids. It's the Cabaret version, which means it's much smaller. It's designed to be a lot more compact than a full-size arcade machine like this Atari Centipede over here that I have next to my NBA Jam, which is the full-size version. Atari made these Cabarets for locations that didn't have nearly as much room. So very, very short. This is like not even 4 feet tall, I think. Very compact, smaller monitor, but the same kind of gameplay. And I'm eager to get this working again. So let me show you what it's doing when I turn it on. So we'll come around to the back of the cabinet here. And apologies, it is quite dusty. I've got it plugged in, and I'm only doing this because I think I know what's going to happen. If you have a game that you have no idea if it's working or not, you don't want to just turn it on. So here we go, 3, 2, 1. And here's some HV from the monitor. We'll come around to the front, and immediately we see the start buttons are going crazy. And this is actually a bit different from what it was doing before, which is not reassuring. So we'll go and turn this back off again. Whoa, gimbal's not cooperating. So there we go, we're turned off. Now what this was doing before actually was it was coming up and I was getting an image on the screen, but it would the image would come up and it would be displayed for about a second. The objects would start to move and then it would cut out and kind of reset. So I don't know if that was watchdogging or whatever with the CPU resetting. This blinking over here and nothing coming up on the image on the screen, that's new. So hopefully we'll be able to figure out. I'm guessing it's either got to be, hopefully an electrical issue, a power issue, or maybe a board issue. It's not a monitor issue because it was displaying before. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow this little guide that Andrew B. put together on the KLOV forums, the KLOV forums, forums.arcade-museum.com. Andrew B., great guy, knows a ton about vector games, especially Atari vector games like Asteroids. Again, Asteroids is a vector game, which means instead of, like all these other games here, Vanguard, Time Pilot, Kangaroo, these are raster games which kind of draw images on the screen like a typewriter with pixels and whatever. Vector games like Asteroids and like my Tempest, which is also sadly currently not working properly, they draw lines directly on the screen, sort of an XY vector sort of configuration, and it's like a wireframe sort of thing. Anyway, and those games work a little bit differently than normal raster games. So Andrew B. put a little guide here together, and I'll link to it in the video description down below. Basically, this is how to, like it says, how to bring up an unknown condition Asteroids game for the first time. So that's a little bit different for us. It's not unknown condition. We know it's having some issues. It's not the first time because this was working up until recently. But we're still going to follow this step-by-step guide here to hopefully isolate the different subsystems within the game, find the problem, and fix the problem. To start, all I'm going to need is a multimeter. I use a Fluke 117, and I find that's a very good multimeter. There are cheaper ones out there. This has more features. It's more accurate. It's more reliable, more durable, and but it is more expensive. So that's what we're going to do. So hopefully this is a very basic thing. Fingers crossed. Hopefully I'm not jinxing myself. And we'll get this thing up and running again. I know a lot of times, folks, I do things that I don't think are particularly advanced. But if you're new to the hobby, a lot of stuff might seem intimidating at first. And one of the things I want to do, on my channel is make this stuff seem very approachable, the kind of thing that anybody could do. So this will hopefully be a very, very basic repair to give you confidence to tackle this sort of thing yourself. So I'm just going to open up the back door and we'll see what's going on here. There is unfortunately no instruction sheet on this back door. It must have been removed at some point. And here we go. Let me actually go and grab a flashlight real quick. Okay, let's take a look at what's going on inside of this machine. So obviously we start with the power cord coming into the cabinet. That's going to go through the switch box right here and then into our transformer assembly. Let me see if I can get you a little bit closer, take a better look at what's going on. So yeah, there's a transformer assembly down here which has fuses and different plugs for the wiring harness. Power goes various places. It powers the marquee light, different things like that. And it also follows up the wiring harness here up to this AR1 board, which does, I think, it does just power. Later AR2s also did sound, or maybe this does sound too. Yeah, it says regulator audio, so it does both power regulation and I guess it has the audio amp mechanism on it too. And then we have our game board right here. This is a single board game, single PCB, and then the connector goes up here to the monitor. You really won't be able to see it there. There's part of the frame right here. This is a G05 805. I think Atari tried to claim it's a 15-inch monitor. I think it's really a 13-inch monitor. This is the same one that's in my Battlezone Cabaret out in the garage, which is also not working, but we knew that. So yeah, this is basically where we're going to be working. It's a little bit more cramped and confined than in a full-size cabinet, but relatively clean and in relatively good shape. So there we go. So let me start by consulting Andrew B's guide. It says to start, unplug the game board and monitor before powering it up for the first time. So the monitor plug is right up here. And we will disconnect that. And so this is an all-in-one sort of connection. So this connection does, which is just a Molex that I disconnected here. This has both the power and the video signal. So we'll kind of tuck that out of the way and being careful so that it doesn't make contact with anything else. And then we also want to disconnect the game board, which is this here, which just has a single edge connector from the wiring harness. And we will pull this out very carefully. There we go. We'll tuck that out of the way. And it doesn't look too dirty, but maybe that could stand to be cleaned a little bit. Wouldn't that be nice if that was just our issue, a dirty connection? And then Andrew B says, also put the dip switches on the game board into free play mode, which I'm not going to do. I think the dip switches are here and there. I'm not going to do that just because I know the credit switches work, so that's not going to be an issue for testing. But let's go and look down here. It says, before powering anything, inspect the inside of the cab. Look for mice nests, chewed wires, or anything electrical that doesn't look right. This is actually fairly clean. Again, I've been through this thing before. Maybe a little, some dust bunnies, that sort of stuff. But nothing too bad. I don't love that I kind of did a wire nut job on hook up the new power cord, but it's fine. Everything looks relatively okay, but we don't trust our eyes. But again, nothing crazy like a rat's nest, that sort of stuff. It says test the fuses on the power brick, the big transformer assembly at the base of the cab, with a digital multimeter. And he says to remove each fuse, check it for the right value, and then put it back in. We're not going to do all that, only because I've done that before, and I know the values are correct, and that sort of thing. So this is kind of a cramped space here, but let me pull these other plugs out of the way. And these are designed for different sort of power setups, like overseas, like 230 volts instead of 120 volt setups. There's this fish paper that kind of covers up the fuses. There we go. Pull that out of the way. Okay, that's our fish paper. And you can see the fuses down there. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'll grab my multimeter right here. I don't know if I'll be able to put this flashlight anywhere. Hopefully you can still see what's going on. My head's not in the way. So we'll turn on our multimeter and set it to continuity. So basically, this is just going to beep when there is a connection between the two leads. So hold them together and it beeps. And so we can come down here and test each of these fuses to make sure none of them are blown. And I'm going to go from not fuse end to fuse end. I'm going to go from connector to connector. That means that there's a good connection between the fuse and the connector and the holder. So the first one's good. Second one's good. Third one's good. Fourth one's good. Fifth one's good. Okay, fuses are all good, which is not surprising. So we'll move on to the next step. If all checks out, leave the game board and monitor unplugged and power the cab on. And we're going to measure the 5 volts DC connection at the AR board, also called the AR1, which is, again, over here above the game board. So measure the 5 volt, positive 5 volt DC on the AR board using the AR's plus 5 volt and ground test points with the game board unplugged and adjust it to 6.2. Okay. So a little bit of information going on there. So Atari, their stuff is actually very well designed. Let's see, we've got speaker connections. There's a ground right there. Where's the 5 volt test point? See another ground. All right, 5 volt is right there. So I'm going to take my multimeter and I'm going to connect these alligator clips onto the ends of the leads. That will allow me to grab on to stuff and not just have to hold the leads in place. So again, the 5 volts is right there. Okay, that's on. And there's a couple different grounds. I'll use the ground that's right here. Okay, so that's good. And Andrew says, adjust it to 6.2. So this is a bit strange, and he adds a note. The 6.2 is normal because Asteroids ARs read high on the 5 volts when the game board is not plugged in. A setting of 6.2 volts will come down to 5.0 volts on the game board when it's plugged in. If the voltage reads much higher than 6.2, like for example 9 volts or more, and you can't adjust it down to 6.2 using the pot on the board, there's a problem with the AR. Don't proceed until you fix the AR. Don't plug in a game board in. You will damage it. So kind of what's going on here is most games and most sort of computers and electronic devices from this era use a couple different voltages. The most common one, the most important one is 5 volts DC. You'll also see 12, you'll also see -5, you can see some other stuff too. But typically 5 volts is the most important voltage. That's what powers all of the microchips and the integrated circuit chips and all kinds of stuff there. They all use 5 volts. So 5 volts is typically the most important voltage that you're going to need on these things. And obviously 5 volts doesn't come out of your wall socket. You're typically going to get 120 volts if you live in the US, something like that. And so between the transformer assembly and the AR power supply board, it's going to turn that 120 volts of alternating current, AC, into the various DC direct current voltages that you do need, like the 5 volts. And typically they're going to put out 5 volts, and you will see a voltage drop sometimes between what comes out of the power supply board and goes into your PCB, and that's normal. But I guess on Asteroids in particular, you're going to see, you really want to see 5 volts unloaded on the power supply board, and it'll drop down to 5 volts. So this advice does not apply sort of universally. So often, if you are cranking up your power supply board to 6.2, hoping you'll see 5 on the board, you're going to see a lot more than 5 and can potentially fry stuff. So your mileage may vary. So we'll come back here and we'll point down here because we want to see the power switch and the multimeter. So again, got it turned on. It's set to DC volts. We're connected to the 5 volt and ground test points on the AR board. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, and we're looking for 6.2. All right, so let's fire this up and see what we get. Again, we are looking for 6.2 volts of DC on the multimeter. In 3, 2, 1. Oh, so one thing I forgot to mention is for safety purposes, there is a hardware interlock switch right here. And this needs to be either pushed in for the game to operate or pulled out for the game to operate. So with the back door on, it holds the thing closed, so that's fine. But when you've got the back door off, you need to pull this switch out. And that's for safety purposes. You know, if the back door's off and things are exposed, you don't want kids touching high voltage. So we'll pull this out in 3, 2, 1. And we are at 6.2. So that's 6.21. That's close enough from my perspective to 6.2. All right, so I'll turn it off. The next thing Andrew B's guide says is also measure the AC voltage on the 10.3 volt DC test point on the AR. Yes, measure AC on the DC test point. If the AC voltage is less than 0.5 volts, your big blue cap on the power brick is fine, which is that thing right there. No need to replace it. So this is basically testing this big filter cap on the transformer assembly, and if that thing is going, that can cause issues. So again, I've got the game turned off. We're coming back here, and I'm going to move the test point from, or the testing thing from here to there, which is the 10.3 test point. We'll come back down here so we can see the multimeter. I'm going to leave it on AC for now, or DC for now, just to show you what it does. Turning it back on in 3, 2, 1. All right, and it's a little bit high, but that's fine because this is an unregulated voltage. So for it to be a bit higher than the 10.3, that's perfectly normal. But let's see what happens when we turn it to AC. Yeah, we're just below half a volt, so that's close to the limit. So I'm guessing this is probably not the issue. Basically, this is what's called AC ripple. And the point of this filter cap is to prevent AC ripple. So the bridge rectifier in here is what's turning the AC voltage into DC voltage. And some of the, I don't know if you would call it the frequency, or the alternating frequency basically of these AC voltage can kind of leak through the bridge rectifier. And that's what the filter cap is designed to sort of filter that out. And if too much gets through, it can kind of interfere with the DC voltage and the chip's ability to make use of it. So I don't think this is the issue. Again, this is relatively high, but still below that 0.5 threshold. Oh, actually, I'm reading this totally wrong. So this is well below the threshold, because the limit is, if it's as long as it's less than half a volt of AC, the big blue is doing its job. And this is less than a tenth of a volt. I was reading it with the sort of like that. So it would have to be 0.5, not 0.05. So that's not the issue. So let's go back to, turn it off and go back to the guide here. It says if either of the above are not okay, meaning the 5 volts and the AC ripple, do not proceed further. Report back here, because it'll help you out on the forums. Else, power the cab down, which we've already done. Plug the game board back in, not the monitor, just the game board. So we'll do that like this. Line up the edge connector housing with the edge connector. Hard to do with the camera in the way, so apologies for that. Okay, that's plugged in. And power back up. Leave the monitor still unplugged for now, and I want you to measure and adjust the 5 volts on the game board's 5 volt and ground test points, not the AR. So we want exactly 5 volts down here. And so we've got a couple of different test points going on the game board itself. Let me get reacquainted with all of where those are. Okay, I see the 5 volt is over here. So we'll connect that and be careful not to touch the alligator clip to anything else metal to metal. So that looks good. And then where's a good ground test point? It's got to be around here somewhere. All right, see it right there. So we'll grab ground from here. Come on. Oh, jeez. Doing this with one hand with the camera in the way. and holding the flashlight. Okay, that looks good. So we'll come back down here to the multimeter and we'll switch it to DC volts. And we're looking for pretty close to 5.0 here. And here we go, 3, 2, 1. 4.9, so a tiny bit low, but not really something I'm super concerned with. I want to adjust it though, see if I can really get it into right around 5. And we have an adjustment pot here. Whoops, scared myself for a minute, but all I did was bump into the interlock switch. So we'll turn that back on and we'll come in here and try to adjust this pot ever so slightly. Come on. Trying not to touch anything. Yeah. Okay, there's actually, let me turn this off. We've got an issue, whoa, strobe light effect. There's a little bit of hot glue on this pot that I'm gonna peel off, which is preventing my ability really, I think, to adjust it. Let me see if that helps now. And we can move this a little bit. Okay, turning it back on. And let's get back up to 5.0, which is, whoa, that's not good. I'm not sure what happened. I thought I saw briefly like 8 volts. So something's not right. Turn it back down again. We're at 4.9. Something's weird. Something's really strange here. Okay, something weird is going on. I was able to adjust the AR to just about 5.0 volts on the board. It's still doing the same thing. The lights are flashing rapidly, but I'll do this for the sake of science. If I turn up the voltage just a little bit here, you'll see what happens. Huh. Every time I was adjusting that, it would spike to like 8 volts, and that's not great. So maybe that's what happened. Maybe higher than 5 volts got fired on down into the PCB. So let me do a bit more research, but perhaps this is more than a basic fix. Oh no. Okay, I was able to mess around with the pot a little bit up on the AR2, and now we've got decent voltage reading from the PCB, about 5.1 volts, which is good. But unfortunately, if we come around back to the front of the cabinet, it's still doing the exact same thing. Those start buttons are still flashing rapidly, and there's nothing on the monitor, which is dusty. But if I do this, I'll reach in here and turn on the test mode switch. Look at that, beautiful picture, and everything looks good. So those numbers represent like the settings, like the dip switch settings and what pricing thing you'd have it set to. In the upper left-hand corner, if the test mode detected any ROM issues, I think there'd be some alphanumeric codes up there. And I can click on all these buttons and they make sounds when I do that. So all those are good. But yeah, if we switch back to normal mode, not good. And in fact, if we come in to the cabinet and we tilt up, come on, don't fight me, gimbal, you can see that our spot killer light is on because I plugged the monitor back in. You know, I checked with some folks on CLAV, including Andrew B., and he said that that spike in voltage was likely just from a dirty pot on the AR2. And he actually recommends replacing that with a sealed pot. He says that's what he does whenever he works on AR2s. Now, but check this. Another thing I think is interesting is if I switch it back to test mode, okay, well that's okay. Let me try it again. Once in a while, I will get, and it's not doing it yet for me. Come on. There we go. You hear that? 2 low tones. That's a failure in test mode. And I believe that is a RAM failure. But it's weird. It's supposed to be like, I don't know, series of low tones and then a really low tone to indicate which RAM is wrong. So I don't know if the test mode is running incorrectly. You can switch back to normal mode. You get a beep from the test. And then I'm back in test mode again, and it's passing just fine. So I don't know what to make of that. And see, that was weird again. A low tone, and that one low tone and one very low tone. But so intermittent test failures, I don't know what to make of that. And I did read on Clov, I don't know if it was Vector Collector or somebody else that said, rapidly switching the test button on and off could potentially result in, inconsistent or bad readings. So I don't know what to make of that. There's one more thing that I want to try, which is disabling the watchdog. So let me get that set up and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, to disable the watchdog, which will ideally potentially prevent the CPU from just resetting nonstop, I have that white jumper cable back there with alligator clips. Down to the bottom, there is a test point that is labeled watchdog disable, and then the upper one is just another ground, so I'm disabling the watchdog. And here's what happens when I power up the cabinet like that. We still have our 5 volts, but if we come back up here, we will see still no bueno. That spot killer light is still on, which means we're not getting a good signal coming out of the PCB. But at least the start buttons aren't flashing. And if we try to go to test mode, we get nothing. So that's whatever. Let me turn off the cabinet at this point, and I'll remove the watchdog disable jumper. Okay, and we'll power back up. I don't know what that's all about. What is this thing doing? All right, we're back in test mode and it's fine, but if I go out of test mode, it's flashing again, but it was making sounds before. So at this point, I don't know what's going on. This is definitely outside of a simple fix. We tried we tried testing voltages. We tried test mode. We're not getting some great help there. I'm kind of suspecting that it's, a RAM issue maybe, because that's what those tones in the test mode are supposed to indicate. Could be a bad RAM chip, could be a bad socket. But to go any further, we're going to have to bust out the big guns. And by the big guns, I mean this little thing right here. This is actually an FPGACAT box. It is a modern FPGA reproduction of an old tool that Atari used to make called the CAT box, which is like the computer-assisted tester or something like that. This is made by a Clov user, Fred Cawthorn. And for him, the CAT stands for Classic Arcade Tester. So this is an FPGA based tester that plugs in and emulates a bunch of different processors, 6502, don't quote me, 6809, Z80, a bunch of different stuff. And you can plug this in and test a bunch of stuff on the board. It'll tell you if you've got a bad ROM, bad RAM, it can do signature analysis, that sort of thing. And this thing was gifted to me by my buddy, an Overtime Arcade channel member, Sean Crookshank. So Sean, thank you very much. I've been waiting for a chance to use this, and I finally got one. So let me get this thing all set up, and we can start diagnosing this non-working, recently working Atari Asteroids PCB with our FPGA CAT box. But yeah, this very much is going from a basic repair to maybe a little bit more advanced. All right, we're all set up and ready to go with the FPGA CAT. And it was actually easier to set up than I thought. You know, admittedly, I was a little bit apprehensive, a little bit intimidated by it, but it actually went really, really smoothly. Believe it or not, the absolute longest part of the entire process was getting a Windows laptop set up and ready to go. So it pains me to admit that the software for the FPGA CAT is only compatible with Windows. It's only available for Windows. And it pains me to say that as an Apple devotee, but we've got it all set up and ready to go. This is an old laptop that I got from my parents' house when we moved them out of my childhood home. And this was in a stack of old laptops. It's relatively, I think it's like 2016 or so. It's running Windows 10, which is totally fine. I've even heard of people running this stuff on like Windows 7, but 10, 11, whatever you got, it's good to go. There's a couple of sort of, I guess, precursors or prerequisite pieces of software you need to install first. There's a National Instruments Visa runtime, and then a LabVIEW runtime that you have to install first, and then you install the FPGA CAT software, and I've got version, you'll see right there, 3.08 running, and we're ready to go. So coming back here to the cabinet, I'll show you how I have it set up, and there's a USB cable plugged in to the CAT box, which is sitting right there. So to install this in my Atari PCB, I had to actually take the PCB out of the cabinet, so disconnect it from the harness edge connector, take it out of the cabinet, and I removed the 6502A CPU that would have been back there. Whoops. So I removed the CPU, and I plugged in the 6502 adapter into the CPU socket, which is back there. Maybe you can't see it, I don't know. And that ribbon cable connects the 6502 adapter to the FPGA CAT box. And then again, we have a USB cable connecting that to the computer. I do have an oscilloscope probe plugged into one of the ports on the FPGA CAT. And all that's doing is grounding the FPGA CAT to the PCB. So if you see the tip of the probe isn't even connected, it's just using the ground sort of alligator clip connected to a ground test point on the PCB. And then this thing is back in the cabinet. It's plugged back into the wiring harness. It's kind of sticking out maybe an inch or so. But yeah, so the FPGA CAT is basically going to emulate the 6502A CPU and run some different instructions, some different tests. Can test the RAM, the ROM, various other things. It can test the vector generator, and hopefully it'll help us find out what's going on. There's actually a couple different ways on Atari PCBs to connect it. I don't know if you're going to be able to see. There is back there a little additional edge connector on the bottom of the board. That was originally designed for the original Atari CAT box to plug into PCBs and perform diagnostics. And you can still connect it to the FPGA CAT that way. And there's a sort of an edge connector adapter in the box or in the package that I got for the FPGA CAT. But you still have to remove the 6502 processor from the socket in order to do that. So you might as well just use the CPU or the socket adapter for that. So we're all plugged in again. We've got this the PCB in the cabinet, the 6502 A CPU was removed from the socket on the PCB. The 6502 CPU adapter is plugged into the socket, and then the ribbon cable connects that to the FPGA CAT. I have one oscilloscope probe grounded to the PCB, and then a USB cable connects us back up to the computer. So with that, we'll get set up on the tripod, and we can start running some tests here, and hopefully it'll show up okay. I know there's glare, and this is not the greatest, it's not the greatest screen or whatever. So what we'll do here is we'll hit load, and this is sort of just the setup page that opens up when you start the program. We'll click on load config, and there's a bunch of different configurations for different game boards. You can also technically create your own if there's one isn't here, like there isn't one for any IREM games like Moon Patrol, whether that would be under IREM or Williams. But here we go under Atari, we'll go to Asteroids. You can see there's a bunch of different games loaded here. we'll be revisiting or visiting Tempest at some point. So Asteroids, there's an older version, the current version, and there's actually a community contributed version, but we'll go with the normal Catbox Asteroids for now. We'll click load, and so that loads up all the different parameters we need to run the test, and we'll go over here, and we'll actually start with a, before I do that, I missed a step. So we've actually got to turn on the cabinet and then turn on the Catbox and connect everything. So I've got everything plugged in. I'm actually going to start the cabinet first. I think technically you can do it in either order, but I just pulled the interlock switch. The cabinet is technically on. There's no CPU in the PCB, so nothing's running. I've got everything connected, the COM port, whatever, that's all set up. Just follow the instructions. I'll hit open, and this says please wait, and it should connect. Yep, it says Logic 1.15 hardware version 1T turbo, and there are some lights, transmission and receive lights flashing on the Catbox. And then here we can go to the ROM test, and we can hit start ROM. And that was really fast. There's only, I guess, 4 ROM chips, and it passed all of those with no problem. Hopefully you're able to see this. Maybe I should bring you a little bit closer. What do you think? Is that any better? And I know the glare is kind of bad. Hopefully you can see what's going on. But yeah, we passed all of the ROM tests. So that's both a good sign that nothing's wrong with that and a bad sign that we haven't found the problem yet. So I'll click on RAM, and we will start the RAM test. And it passed all the RAM tests. So I'm a little bit disappointed now because I was hoping that it was a simple RAM problem, just a RAM chip gone bad. You know what I'm going to do though is I'm going to set this to run for a while. So I'm clicking on repeat, which means it's going to loop. It'll keep all the errors. It'll play a sound on air and stop if there's any errors. There's different ROM tests you can run, random, sequential, whatever. I'll just set random, and we'll go ahead and clear results. And we'll hit start RAM test. So now this is running over and over and over again. It's looping, it's randomly testing the RAM just in case there's some other kind of error. So I'm gonna let this run for a couple minutes, and then we'll come back and see what we've got at that point. Okay, this looping random RAM test has been running for a while, and we've got no errors. So again, I wish it had found something at this point. So from here, there's a couple different directions we can go. I can test the vector generator with Asteroids boards. That requires a little bit of temporary board modification. You got to lift a leg on a capacitor to do that, so that the FPGACAT can like reset it or something like that. So before I do that, one of the things I want to try is, you know, maybe it's the CPU itself that's bad, that 6502A that we had to remove from the socket in order to plug the FPGACAT in. So what I'm going to do, I've got another one out in my parts bins in the garage. I'm going to go grab another 6502A CPU. I'm going to plug it into the socket, and we'll test that to see if maybe it was just a bad CPU. So keep your fingers crossed that that's what it is. All right, guys, I've jumped ahead a little bit, so let me get you caught up on what I've done. Well, first, I went ahead and tried a different 6502A CPU, and nothing doing there. That didn't help. Same issues as before, watchdogging, etc. So I threw the original 6502A CPU back into the socket. A couple folks on the Claw forums were saying there was something you can do to basically isolate or disable the vector generator from the rest of the CPU. Essentially, you got this L6 right here. You can remove it, socket, replace it, and lift pin 1 on that chip. So let's see if there's an angle where you can see what that looks like. So you can see that chip right there. Right here has been socketed. Let me see if I can zoom in there. So L6 here has been socketed, and pin 1 right there has been lifted up. So that's not in contact with the socket. And by doing that, we disable, like I said, the vector generator and isolate the CPU side of the board. And so if the issue is still, if we've still got the issue and it's not, playing blind, well, we know the problem is on the CPU side of the board and not the vector generator side. And unfortunately, when I did that, it's still watchdogging, and I'm kind of at a loss at this point. You know, there's a couple other things that I can try, but this video is already late. Guys, I've been working on this for over 2 weeks. I actually missed a weekend episode. I know, one of the first times I've ever done it, maybe only the second time I've ever missed a weekly episode, and I'm sorry. But if I don't stop here, this episode's going to be late too, or we'll be late for this this weekend too, and I don't want you let you guys down. So we don't have really a happy ending here because it's not working. It's still not working. There are some more things that I want to try, and like as you can see, I pulled the PCB out of the cabinet. It's on a milk crate here, so we got the wiring harness hanging out. It's still not working, but there is something interesting happening. I don't know if you want to count this as progress. Let me reach in here and pull this interlock switch, if I can find it. And you see that it's still watchdogging. These start buttons are still flashing, but I'm going to give this a couple minutes and then I'll come back and show you what happens after it warms up for a bit. Check it out. After running for, I don't know, 3 minutes or so, the watchdogging has stopped. And believe it or not, guys, this thing is playing blind. Every once in a while, you might have heard it, the coin counter just sort of clicks on its own and it thinks a credit has been added. You know, it almost went into watchdogging again right there. So this is really still kind of flaky, but I can come down here and hit the credit switch. And whoops, for a second there, I had a credit, but it is resetting. So there it is right there. We can hit start, and this thing is playing blind. Listen, it's playing. We can hit thrust, we can hit fire, and then it resets again. And sometimes it'll go into watchdogging. Sometimes I can like even finish a turn and die, but it does quickly reset. So I don't know, is that progress? It's kind of playing blind. It's still resetting, but it's not watchdogging right now. And I don't know what's going on. Let me turn this off in case there's any sort of issues that are happening. You know, and I tried a bunch of different stuff. I broke out my logic probe and, you know, I was looking for some things. It's not quite giving me, you know, the granularity of troubleshooting that I'm looking for. I busted out my thermal camera, my IR camera, you know, to look at the game while it was running the game board and see if there was anything, you know, super hot. I'll show a picture of it right here, you know, just to see if anything jumps out as being, you know, hotter than it should be. And, you know, to my untrained eye, I didn't notice anything particularly out of sorts. And then, you know, it stopped watchdogging. So I don't know what that means. Again, talking to Andrew B on the Claw forums, he thinks it might be a RAM issue, some intermittent marginal RAM. And the next thing to do at this point is, you know, to learn how to do signature analysis with the FPGACAT signature analysis, and I can check lots of different individual things. I'll probably want to bust out the Rigel down there. Digital oscilloscope and hook that up and really inspect the clocks and make sure I've got all the clocks at the right, you know, frequency. But all that's going to happen in a future episode. So yeah, we'll figure out how to do signature analysis with the cat box and sort of take it from there. So really want to thank, in particular, Sean Cruikshank, Overtime Arcade channel member Sean Cruikshank, for gifting me this really awesome FPGA cat box, and also to Fred Cawthorn, Clav forums member Fred Cawthorn, for building this awesome tool. There's a link down below if you want to look into ordering one for yourself. And yeah, also really want to thank all of the Overtime Arcade channel members. This is an awesome group, you know, call them the super fans of the channel, about 100 or so of them. They all donate $1.99 a month, and in exchange they get access to some awesome perks. They get access to a monthly members only live stream, and our one for March is coming up soon. They get early access to all new videos. They're watching this video on Friday. You guys are probably, you know, all the rest of you in the public, you're waiting until Sunday. This video isn't coming out to the public until Sunday. And perhaps best of all, they get access to our private members only Discord. I would argue it is the most awesome, positive community of arcade collection and restoration enthusiasts that you'll find online today. So click that join button down below if you want to learn more about what it means to become an Overtime Arcade channel member and join this illustrious group of handsome and intelligent folks who make up our channel members here. Anyway, if this is your first time here, welcome. Please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. I typically upload on Sundays. Sometimes I'll do a little short or something or a live stream in between. And yeah, sometimes I miss a weekend. I'm only human. So anyway, I'm delirious. I need to go to bed. I got work tomorrow. But anyway, as always, thanks for watching Overtime Arcade. I've been Charlie, and I'll see you next time.
Overtime!